Hey friends, it's your children's pastor, Jackie Monastra. Today is our last day in our series, Resilient. And in my opinion, we've saved the best story for last. I think we should celebrate it with a party. When I was younger, my favorite type of party was a sleepover. My friends and I would stay up super late, eating candy and telling jokes and laughing. We'd tell stories and enjoy being together. It was so fun. Today's story is all about a sleepover too. But this sleepover isn't exactly a super fun one, and it actually probably was really scary. Today's story is all about Daniel and the world's scariest sleepover. It's Daniel in the lion's den. Just like all the stories in this series, today involves a king and some pretty crazy times. This time there's a new king. His name is King Darius. At this time, Daniel has slowly become one of the king's trusted helpers. He has become a distinguished person in Babylon who is known for being loyal and helpful, which, honestly, made a lot of other people who work for the king super jealous. Those jealous people went to the king and asked him to pass a sneaky law. A law that wouldn't be good for Daniel or for those who follow God. The law said that anyone who didn't bow down to the king, and only the king, would face a den of hungry lions. Daniel continued to trust and follow and worship God, and only God, and the jealous people told the king that Daniel had broken the law. King Darius had just made the law and couldn't overturn it. Grab your Bibles and turn to Daniel chapter 6. Here is what happened next. We're going to read Daniel 6, verses 14 through 23. It says this: Hearing this, the king was deeply troubled, and he tried to think of a way to save Daniel. He spent the rest of the day looking for a way to get Daniel out of this predicament. In the evening, the men went together to the king and said, "Your Majesty, you know that according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, no law that the king signs can be changed." So at last, the king gave orders for Daniel to be arrested and thrown in a den of lions. The king said to him, "May your God, whom you serve so faithfully, rescue you." A stone was brought and placed over the mouth of the den. The king sealed the stone with his own royal seal and the seals of his nobles so that no one could rescue Daniel. Then the king returned to his palace and spent the night fasting. He refused his usual entertainment and couldn't sleep at all that night. Very early the next morning, the king got up and hurried out to the lion's den. When he got there, he called out in anguish, "Daniel, servant of the living God, was your God, whom you serve so faithfully, able to rescue you from the lions?" Daniel answered, "Long live the king! My God sent his angel to shut the lions' mouths so that they would not hurt me, for I have been found innocent in his sight, and I have not wronged you, your majesty." The king was overjoyed and ordered that Daniel be lifted from the den. Not a scratch was found on him, for he had trusted in his God. Daniel in the lion's den is one of my favorite stories of rescue. Imagine facing lions, hungry, giant, growling lions, and watching God close their mouths. Imagine facing your fear and watching God take care for you. Which brings me to point number one. Point one. Life brings challenges and fears. I'm sure that Daniel felt afraid when he was led to the den of lions. Just like the story of Rakshak and Benny, Daniel was faced with a choice. He could do what he knew was right, or he could do what the king was asking him to do. He could keep praying to and following, worshiping God, or he could turn his back and walk away. He could abandon God, or he could face punishment of a den of hungry lions. Life brings us challenges that can make us afraid. There are a lot of things in life that can cause us to be afraid, things that can stir up lots and lots of fear in our hearts. You might face a fight with your friends and be afraid you'll never make up. You might be afraid that you're going to fail a test or your homework. You might be afraid of getting sick or getting hurt. You might be afraid of the dark or of spiders or of earthquakes or of snakes. You might be afraid that you aren't good enough or that you haven't done your best in school or at home. You might be afraid to do what's right because others might not agree or like it. There are things that you will face in your life that make you afraid. But when you feel afraid, there are things that you can remember. This brings me to point number 2. Point 2, God is with you and protects you. You see, in the book of Acts, it talks about how the early church who trusted and followed God were filled with his Spirit. You see, that means that you and I, those who are filled with God's power. Romans 8:11 says, "And if the power of him who raised Jesus from the dead is living in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies because of his Spirit who lives in you." That means that God's power is inside of you, working within you. When you feel afraid, remember that God is with you and that nothing can separate you from him. So, what can you do when you feel afraid? Remember that God is with you and protects you. Think of the good things that he has done and will do. Trust him. Stop listening to your fears and start listening to what God says about you. That you're loved, that you're cared for, that nothing can separate you from him if you trust and follow him. Remember to fill your brain and your heart with the good things, with what God is saying. Philippians 4:8, it says this, "Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things." When you feel afraid, remember what God has done and will do. Think on the things that are good and right and pure and lovely and from God. All right, friends, I will see you next time. Bye.